We are in the book of John. We're going to be in chapter. Do you guys have Bibles? Anybody? Once, twice, three times? All right, those might come in handy. We'll see. John chapter 6, if you have a Bible. We have been talking about, we talked last week at length, I guess, about this little meal that took place. Anybody remember the little meal that took place? Okay, some of you do. What was on the menu for this little meal? Bread and fish. So this is like awesome, right? This is just the meal that you want. But if you're hungry, it's good food, I guess. So what kind of fish did we have? Sardines. Now, they may not have been sardines. It may have been something bigger, but still something that was salted and ready to transfer. And then we also had bread. What kind of bread was it? Okay, they were biscuit-sized. What kind of bread? Ty. Barley loaves, right. So you get barley-sized biscuits, or barley loaves that were size of biscuits, and then you get fish that you're able to travel with. Do you remember how much of each we had? Ben. Close. Further away. 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. And how many people did Jesus feed? Lillian.
20,000.
Right, 20,000 roughly. That's a conservative estimate, meaning it could have been 2-3 times that, but around 20,000 people. So Jesus took 5 barley biscuits and 2 salted fish, and he started breaking them, and he started handing them out to people, and they fed 20,000 people. How much was left over? 5 loaves and 2 fishes, right? They had back what they started with? No? What do you think, Talara? 12 baskets. So they fed 20,000 people and they had way more left over after the fact than they started with. So not a bad deal. And what we said last week was it all hinged upon one little kid who said, "Here, you can have my lunch." It isn't much, but you can have it. And so that's the story that we were teaching through John chapter 6. And that ended in verse 14. So I want to pick up this evening in verse 15 of John chapter 6. Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. So you think about it, you've got 20,000 hungry people who are now 20,000 full people. And all of a sudden, wow, this guy can feed us. And isn't that what we want our government to do? We want our government to feed us. No, that's a horrible idea. But people are inherently lazy, and that is what they want. They want somebody else to provide for their needs, to feed them. And if it means having a government that will feed me, then fine. And so they were about to make Jesus king. One of the things that Jesus ran into periodically was people who were like, "Hey, we want you to be king." Now, is Jesus going to be king? Eventually, but not on his earthly ministry here, not during his time here. His function wasn't to be king. His function was to be the sacrifice. He was to be the anointed one who would die for his people, not the one who would reign over his people. That was going to come still in our future even. And so the people were getting ready to make him king, and you figure once a mob gets going, it's hard to shut down. Once a group of people, once you have 20,000 people showing up and all saying one thing and all doing one thing, it can get really contagious, really fast, really bad. And so Jesus didn't want that, and so he literally just walked away. Like they were all like, "Oh, this is a good thing," and he sensed this is where the crowd was going. And before they have a chance to start talking about it, before anybody says, "Let's make him king," he just gets up and he walks away. Weird, right? But this is Jesus. This is what he does. And he goes off to pray. Now, the other disciples, Gospels tell us that he told the disciples to get into a boat to cross to the other side. He was going to go pray for a while, and he'd join them later. So the other side of what? The Sea of Galilee, right. So we're back in the Sea of Galilee. Geography plays a lesson, or plays a part in much of the New Testament. And so we'll draw a little bit more today. Not the whole map, just the Sea of Galilee. So let's continue on. Anyway, so he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when the evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and went out over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was already dark, and Jesus had not come to them. So they said, look, guys, Jesus said get in the boat and go, so let's get in the boat and go. Now, you think about it this for 1 second. Occupationally, what were many of Jesus' disciples? What job had they had before they were Jesus' disciples? Benjamin. They were fishermen. So fishermen work on what type of vehicles? What's that get in? Boat, right. Fishermen work on boats. They spend most of their life on their boats. They know boats. That's one, fishermen, boats, they kind of go together like race car drivers and cars, right? Like astronauts and space shuttles. They just get it. And so these guys, at least 4 of them, they were fishermen. They had grown up literally on the sea. Probably they had been in boats before they could walk. But they had grown up on the Sea of Galilee. They were second, third, fourth generation fishermen. And so they knew the Sea of Galilee. They knew boats. They knew everything. And so they just got down. For them to get into a boat and cross the Sea of Galilee was no big deal. It was just, this is just as luxury. We don't even have to go fishing. We're just cruising here. This is nothing for them. And so they get into the boat. They go out. John notes, they go out, they leave where they were, but Jesus didn't get in the boat yet. So is that a problem? Kind of, right? Because they left him behind, but he told them to, so it's not a big deal. Then we get to verse 18. Then the sea arose because a great wind was blowing. So when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. Now, let's think about this. A couple things going on here. First of all, big storm on the Sea of Galilee came up out of nowhere. So we talked last week about the Sea of Galilee, and I'll draw it off to the side here. But you have the Sea of Galilee, you have the Jordan River, and then you have the Dead Sea. Okay? So this is the map. If we were to push this out bigger and make the Sea of Galilee bigger, what we would find geographically, the map thing, right, is... So we'll go Sea Galilee. I got to make this taller somehow. Now we know that Jesus, where he went up where to pray? What's that? Went up into a mountain to pray. So we get already that there are some mountains around the Sea of Galilee, right? If you would look at this geographically, what you would find is there are, in fact, mountains just about all around the Sea of Galilee, and it's actually this kind of bowl shape in the middle of the mountains is the sea. Now, here's what happens. When the wind comes down, it comes across the sea, it hits these mountains. What do you suppose it does when it hits the mountain? Now, wind's going to take the path of least resistance. It can either go up and over or it can go around. It does a little bit of both. But a lot of what it does is it then hits this mountain and it starts swinging. And it'll go this way. And it just, mountains. Everywhere it goes, there's mountains. And now we're getting more coming in here. And it can't escape. And what happens is the wind just literally rolls in circles around the Sea of Galilee. What do you think that does to the waves? Starts pushing them, doesn't it? No matter which way the wind happens to be blowing around there, it's blowing across the sea and it's blowing around the sea. Do you think it churns up the water just a little bit? So you get what is really we would think of as just kind of a large lake, but because of where it's located around the mountains, the wind starts whipping it and the waves start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And a lot of the boats that are on the Sea of Galilee are just these small fishing boats. We wouldn't even think, Jesus got on the ship and we're thinking Titanic, and really we should be thinking rowboat. would be actually closer. Very small. You're talking, 18 to 20 foot boats, single mast with a triangular shaped sail. They, a little bit of wind pushes them out in the lake. They let down their nets. They pull them up. Not big deal. And so we need to maybe reduce our imagination a little bit. Jesus wasn't in the ship. They were in the ship. Boat, think smaller. And so here they are. They're out now. They're sailing along, and all of a sudden the storm kicks up, and now they're having to row. Now, these are not boats that are really designed to be rowed. They are sailboats, but you get a couple dudes and a couple oars, and you can row them. And so you have these guys. The sea was their life, and so they're out rowing the boat. You ever rowed before? Anybody ever tried rowing? That's work, isn't it? Work. You've seen those guys on the river when they're racing every spring. It's like, they got these chairs that slide and everything. Of course, I don't think they had chairs that slid. But, you put your oar in the water and you pull it back and you up, down. And you have to push the oar down so it comes out of the water, and you have to swing it forward so it goes out. And you have to drop it back in and pull it. And this whole circular motion as you're going. You can imagine what that does to your arms and your shoulders and your gut and your chest. And if you're really into it, you get your butt muscles in because they're big muscles, right? And so they're rowing and they're rowing. This is a lot of work. But again, these guys are sailors. They're fishermen. They're used to it. And so they don't row a little bit. They've rowed like 3 or 4 miles doing this. They're fighting the wind. They're fighting the waves. And they're trying to get to the other side where Jesus told them to go. And they're working and they're working. And somebody looks up and say, "Hey, what's that?" What's what? That over there. Wait a minute. Wait for the next wave. Okay, see that. And what do they see? They see Jesus walking on the water. Now, have you ever seen anybody walk on the water before? So we call this a miracle. It doesn't just happen every day. So Jesus is just out taking a stroll, in the middle of a storm on the water, walking uphill, walking downhill, walking uphill. I tend to think it may have gone flat right where he was, honestly. But, so he's walking. Now, how fast are the disciples rowing if he's catching up with them on foot? Sailing is supposed to be at least a little bit faster than walking, and here's Jesus just walking, and I don't think he's running. He's just walking along, catching up with the disciples, and they're rowing their hearts out, and he's just walking along, catching up to them. You can tell they weren't making a lot of headway here, right? They weren't getting very far very fast, and so he catches up to them. Let's see. So we get down to let's see. Verse 19. So when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. Now, if you were out rowing, gutting it out through this storm, and the wind was howling, and the waves were crashing over your boat, and you were now tired and sweaty because you've been rowing for miles, and Jesus just casually comes strolling up to the boat on the water, would you be a little freaked out? Yeah. Just a tad. And so when, they were afraid, you think? Verse 20, but he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Well, that just said it all. We're calm as glass here, Jesus. Thank you for that. Okay, we know who you are, but you're walking on the water. We're working here, and you're just walking here. Then they willingly received him into the boat, and then the most incredible part of the story happens. Then they willingly received him into the boat. Hey guys, can I come in? Sure. You caught up, might as well, slow down and ride with us. And immediately, the boat was at the land where they were going. It's like kicking the Johnsons, baby. We're there. You feel for the disciples. They've been rowing for 3 or 4 miles. They're working their guts out trying to row the boat there. Jesus gets in and poof. Literally, like Powerpuff Girl, poof. They're there. Bam. How does that happen? You've ever been in a motorboat, you hit the guns, and I don't think it was even that. I think it was just he sat down and, okay, time to get up. It was more like they were transported, like beam me over, Scotty, kind of a deal than anything. He just, and immediately they were there. And it's not like they were close to there. It's not like they had rowed all but the last 100 feet, and Jesus said, "Hey, guys, can I get in for the last 100 feet?" Because that would have been silly. It's like they were still out in the middle of the lake. They weren't anywhere near there yet. Jesus gets in, he sits down, and they're there. how? You can see the disciples going, wait, what? What just happened here? We knew we still had a couple hours to go, and now we didn't. We call that a miracle, right? It's awesome. It's crazy, weird stuff that we don't usually hear about, but it's a miracle. Verse 22. On the following day, when the people who were standing on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other boat there except the one which his disciples had entered, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with the disciples, but his disciples had gone away alone. And so there, you get to the other side, and people are there on the other side, but nobody else showed up. How many boats crossed the lake in the middle of a storm? Just the one, and the only reason they did is because Jesus told them to. And so they're there on the other side of the sea, but they're the only ones there. They're the only ones who've come from where they were to where they are. There's nobody else there. But word had traveled around the sea faster than it had traveled across the sea, and they knew. Some of these people had been there and had walked all night to get home. They're like, wait a minute, the disciples got in a boat and they left. Jesus did not get in the boat when he left. He wasn't walking with us. We know that he was still up in the mountain praying, and yet here he is. Curious. However, verse 23, however, other boats came from Tiberias near the place where they ate bread after the Lord had given thanks. And so there were other people who'd come around. They had literally walked around. It was faster to go around than it was to go through. Some people had left early. So everybody knew what was going on. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they also got into their boats and they came to Capernaum. So the next morning, everybody gets up and are like, oh, where's breakfast? I'm starved. Where's that Jesus dude? Isn't he breaking bread and fish again? Or maybe pancakes and eggs? That'd be better for breakfast. And they're like, hey, where's Jesus? And everybody's like, hey, Jesus, where's Jesus? Hey, where's those 12 dudes who are waiting on us? Where's the waiters? Where's the cook? The king, whatever. And they look around and there's nobody there. They're like, oh, I heard him mention something about going to the other side. And so they all get in boats. All the boats that hadn't crossed the Sea of Galilee, they set sail. And you got this whole fleet of boats going across the Sea of Galilee to get where Jesus was because they were hungry. And it was breakfast time. So they get out there. Verse 25, and when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi or teacher, when did you come here? They're like, Jesus, you weren't in the boat when it left, and yet here you are. When did you get here? How did you get here? They're really confused, which we know how he got there, and it's still a little confusing to us. Jesus said, answered and said to them in verse 26, most assuredly I say to you, you seek me, not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. Why were the people looking for Jesus? Because he was king? Because he was Messiah? Because he had great teaching? Because he healed them? Because he was going to die for them? No. Gideon, why did they look for Jesus? Because they were hungry. And Jesus says, you're just looking for a free meal. You're not in it for what I'm teaching. You're not following me for who I am. You're following me for what I do. And he said, I'm not your magician food maker. Do not labor for food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal on them. So he says, look, you guys got it all backwards, man. You got to not be laboring, not working for this food which perishes and this food which is going to pass away. You need to not be working on the riches of this life, and you need to not be following me because of all the things that I'm doing for you. He said, you need to get that bread of life. You need to find out why I'm really here. Why was Jesus really there? To preach? Right, what did he preach? What was Jesus' continual message to the people? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That was what he wanted them to do. He wanted them to get right with God. He wanted them to get saved. He wanted them to realize that he really was the Messiah, and he didn't come to give them lunch. He came to give them life. So he says, look, you need to work on that. Then they said to him, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? Jesus answered and said to them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent." They're like, okay, well, so about this thing you want us to do, what is the work of God that we need to invest our lives in? What is the work of God that needs to be accomplished in us and through us and by us and for us? And pick your preposition. What is this work of God you speak of? And Jesus said, the work of God is to believe in him whom he has sent. How do you think the people reacted to that? It's a crazy thing, but people actually react to effort differently. When you say, if you were to say, if Jesus had said to them, I want you to crawl from here to Jerusalem, and I want you to make the ascent of the city of Jerusalem on your hands and feet, and I want you to crawl until your knees and your palms are bleeding, would people have done it? People have done that for years. In various religions of mankind, people make pilgrimages and they do crazy stuff and going to crazy places at great personal expense and at great pain. Even the Jews, though he did not call them to do it on their hands and feet, on their hands and knees, did require the people to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem a couple times a year. You know, you see in the Bible, they're like, oh, let's go up to Jerusalem. What does it mean to go up to Jerusalem? You would think it means go north to Jerusalem, right? No, because people in the north would say, let's go up to Jerusalem. People in the south, let's go up to Jerusalem. In the east and the west, let's go up to Jerusalem. Why do you think they said, let's go up to Jerusalem? How about it's on the top of a mountain? No matter where you were going to Jerusalem from, you had to go up. And when they said, let's go up, they meant literally, let's go up to Jerusalem. There are some of the Psalms that are called Psalm of Ascent. And it's the psalms that they would sing as they were climbing the mountains into the city of Jerusalem, because it was literally on a mountaintop. And so people would go and they would make pilgrimage. And it was this, it was this arduous, difficult journey that they would have to undertake. And, it was, you would walk and you would go in crowds, and it was crazy. And Jesus didn't say any of that. He said the work of God isn't to go on pilgrimage. The work of God is not to make some great, terrific sacrifice for the cause. He said the work of God is simply to believe in him whom he has sent. Reason says, logic says, that's easy, everybody should be able to do it, right? But the reality is, more people will do something sacrificial. More people will make a pilgrimage. More people will cost themselves pain and suffering or financial loss than will actually just believe in him whom he has sent. It's like, that's too easy an answer. It doesn't work for me. Like we have this inherent sense of penance that we must do. But people say, well, that's it? You just want me to believe that you're the Messiah? I'm not so sure about that, man. Can I crawl? Can I walk? Can I do something great? And Jesus is like, no. I'll do all the doing. You just believe. And so for us as Christians, one of the things that people will constantly fight against, as you talk to people about what it is to be a Christian, when you talk to people about where you go to church and what we believe, because we believe what the Bible teaches, people have added stuff to it. And we're like, no, let's get back to just what the Bible says. Let's get back to Jesus. I mean, if we could get back to what Jesus taught, do you think we'd be better off? What did Jesus teach? The work was just to believe in him whom God has sent. And people will tell you, well, that's too easy. You mean all I have to do to receive forgiveness from God is ask for it? That's crazy. Is that crazy? We don't think so, because that's what the Bible teaches and that's what we believe. But people who don't believe the Bible, they want to add something to it. And God said there's nothing to add. There's nothing to do. Just believe it. It's simple, and the reason it's simple is because we need it simple. Do we need easy stuff or do we need hard stuff? Do we need simple stuff or do we need complicated stuff? How many of you are doing pre-algebra this year? No? Anybody doing geometry? Oh, do you need hard stuff or easy stuff? I took Geometry 1. twice. You say, Pastor, did you seriously fail geometry? Yeah. I took geometry 1 twice, and I took 3 years of Spanish. I took Spanish 1 twice and Spanish 2 once. So, do we need hard stuff or do we need easy stuff? We need easy stuff. Do we need simple stuff or do we need complicated stuff? We need simple stuff. We always complicate it, and one of the struggles that people have with faith is it's not hard enough. I must need to do more. But Jesus said, the work of God is to believe in him whom he has sent. That's what Jesus calls us to, is simply to believe that he is who he said he is, and to let him do the doing. And to not follow him just for what he's going to feed us. A lot of people still today are very much into, God's just the genie. I tell him what to do and he poofs it in. Does God do that in your experience? God doesn't do that in my experience. Jesus said, that's not what I'm about. I'm about doing the doing, but it's about doing the real doing. It's about life, not lunch. So if you look for me for life, not lunch, and you will just believe in who I am, you've done the work of God. So let me encourage you this week. We're going to go out in the week. We're going to go to school. We're going to go to work. We're going to go to wherever you go. You're going to go to Target. Who knows, Walmart. Do the work of God. Believe in him for life, not for lunch. And believe in him for who he is, not who people want to make him out to be that's very complicated. Can we do that? So we can do the work of the Lord. Let me pray and we'll send this out. Father, we love you. We thank you for the night. We thank you for these stories here, Lord, as we can read about what you ask and desire and expect of us, simply to believe in you for our life. Lord, it's not complicated. It's not simple. And maybe it is too easy, but it's the way you made it. And so we really can't say much about it other than thank you for making it easy, because it's an easy class for us to pass. Father, as we go into the week, would you go with us? Help us to draw from you life. We thank you in Jesus' good name. Amen.